Welcome to the wild world of 1970s cars, a decade when bold ideas met questionable execution. Spoiler alert, beauty was definitely not on their side. 1970 AMC Gremlin. The AMC Gremlin was born out of budget desperation and corporate genius. A cheap hit engineered in record time. AMC needed a subcompact, and someone had the brilliant idea to just chop the back off a Hornet and call it a day. The result? A car that looked like it was built entirely from leftover parts and regret. From the side, it resembled the rear half of a normal car, minus the front half. It was as if the designer got up halfway through sketching, went to lunch, and never came back. And yet, America bought it in droves. Proof that, in the 1970s, low price could excuse just about anything, including looking like a melted lunchbox on wheels. But if you think this was rock bottom for automotive aesthetics, just wait until you see how Buick managed to butcher one of its most beautiful creations. 1970 Buick Riviera. From 1966 to 1969, the Buick Riviera was a rolling sculpture, sleek, graceful, and dripping with presence. And then 1970 happened. It's like the design team collectively lost a bet and had to finish the car while blindfolded and wearing oven mitts. The front grille appears to be sliding off the face like a melted popsicle, while the rear fenders bubble out like fungal growth on a once proud oak. What was once a masterpiece now looked like a surrealist fever dream of a Jaguar, warped, bloated, and weirdly tragic. The Riviera's sails fell harder than its drooping fascia, and Buick scrambled to recover with the boat-tail design a year later. But at least this still looked somewhat like a car. The next entry? A cartoonish mockery of the Thunderbird that makes this swollen Buick seem dignified in comparison. 1970 Ford Thunderbird. Once the epitome of American personal luxury, the Thunderbird had long embodied cool confidence, until 1970, when it suddenly sprouted a chrome-clad schnoz big enough to qualify as a flight hazard. Ford, in a baffling design choice, slapped a giant pointed beak on the front, turning the once smooth cruiser into something that looked more like a rhino impersonating a bald eagle. It's less Thunderbird and more bird that flew headfirst into a brick wall and kept the dent. The rest of the car wasn't terrible, but that nose dominated everything, like a prosthetic stuck on at the last minute by a blind sculptor. Ford wanted aggression. They got avian absurdity. Still, if you think Ford just went a little overboard with the beak, wait until you see what Porsche did when they tried to design a sports car with a ruler and a cardboard box. 1970 Porsche 914. Born from a practical collaboration between Porsche and Volkswagen, the 914 was intended as an affordable entry into the Porsche world. And in many ways it delivered: lightweight, mid-engined, and surprisingly fun to drive. But let's be honest, the styling was unconventional. With its angular lines, flat panels, and squared-off proportions, the 914 looked more like a clever storage solution than a dream machine. The wide gap between the B-pillar and rear wheels didn't help, giving it the stance of a geometry experiment with performance aspirations. It was as if a 911 tried on minimalist modernism and found itself halfway between function and flair. Still, it's earned a cult following, loved for its simplicity, quirkiness, and unmistakable character. And if the 914 was German rationality in sports car form, the next chapter brings something else entirely: a Swedish attempt to blend style and muscle, with mixed results. 1970 Saab Sonett III Saab satte ut att vinna amerikanska köpare med en sportig kupé som kunde konkurrera på deras jord. What they delivered was the Sonett III, a car with proportions that left designers scratching their heads. A nose stretched way too long, paired with a stubby, abrupt rear that looked like it got cut off mid-design. It's as if the Sonett tried to be a Camaro, but got stuck halfway through its metamorphosis, caught somewhere between a hopeful larva and a fledgling muscle car. The awkward balance made it hard to take seriously, despite Saab's reliable engineering underneath. Meanwhile, as Saab was still figuring out its style identity, Japanese automakers were taking their own chances on bold new designs. Spoiler alert, it didn't always work out either. Didn't. 1972 Subaru GL Coupe. Subaru was known for making practical and dependable cars, but with the GL Coupe, they tried to add a bit of flair to their lineup. The result was a compact coupe with a somewhat unusual profile, as if someone had to slightly shorten the rear to fit shipping constraints. This gave the car a distinctive, if somewhat uneven, silhouette that stood out from the more conventional shapes of the time. While its proportions might not have been perfect, the GL Coupe still offered the reliability Subaru was known for. And when compared to some of the more troubled designs from other parts of the world, like the infamous Leyland P76, the Subaru managed to hold its own with a surprising grace. 1973. Leyland P76 Australia aimed to create its own answer to American muscle and luxury with the Leyland P76, a large and bold effort that unfortunately struggled with execution. Featuring a wedge-shaped front end and ambitious dimensions, the P76 faced criticism for inconsistent build quality that sometimes felt less refined than expected. While its design and engineering showed promise, the car suffered from reliability issues and uneven finishes that held it back from widespread success. Despite high hopes, the P76 struggled in the market, selling only around 18,000 units before production ended after 2 years. Still, it remains a notable chapter in Australia's automotive history. And speaking of unique rides, next up is a car that took a very different three-wheeled approach, the ever-controversial Reliant Robin. 1973. Reliant Robin, built with economy and tax breaks in mind, the Reliant Robin's three wheels were meant to make motoring accessible to everyone. But what it delivered was a quirky little vehicle that often teetered on the edge of tipping over. Unsteady, awkward, and undeniably odd. If despair had a shape on wheels, it might just look like the Robin. Small, fragile, and desperately trying to keep its balance. Despite its shortcomings, it carved out a niche among budget-conscious drivers. Now shifting gears from charming oddballs to catastrophic failures, let's take a look at one of the automotive industry's biggest missteps, an attempt at safety that went wildly off course. 1974. Bricklin SV-1. The Bricklin SV-1 was pitched as a safe sports car from the same mind that brought us the infamous Yugo. So expectations were already cautious. Featuring gull-wing doors that often refused to cooperate, panels of uneven plastic, and bumpers that looked more like armor for a deep fryer than automotive protection, the Bricklin was a lesson in overambition gone wrong. It's as if someone crossed a Pontiac with a dumpster and hoped for the best. Despite its bold ideas, poor build quality, and quirky flaws quickly turned the Bricklin into a punchline. And just when you thought the decade's parade of oddities had reached its end, here comes the final act of awkwardness. The Aeroback. 1978 Oldsmobile Cutlass. Aeroback, in an attempt to inject some European flair into their mid-size lineup, General Motors rolled out the Oldsmobile Cutlass Aeroback, a curious mix of ambition and questionable taste. This pseudo-hatchback featured a rear design so awkward it made more heads shake than turn. It's as if the designer tried to channel BMW elegance, but ended up inspired by the shape of a kitchen appliance instead. The market quickly showed its disapproval, pushing GM to introduce a traditional sedan version soon after. The Aeroback perfectly sums up a decade marked by bold experiments that, more often than not, missed the mark. Well, that wraps up our journey through the glorious wreckage of 1970s car design, a time when innovation often meant throwing out the rulebook and basic taste. Some of these cars were ahead of their time. Others? Let's just say time has been very honest with them. But now it's your turn. Which one do you think deserves the title of the ugliest car of the decade? Or did we miss a four-wheeled tragedy that should have made the list? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love cars, even the weird, the wild, and the what were they thinking, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust us, the road ahead is only getting stranger.